Alright friends, let's get started in order. Today we're going to recognize the 10 most catastrophic fires in the history of mankind. Number 10. A fire in Boston. It all started on November 9th, 1872 in the evening, with a small fire in the basement of a building on Summer Street. No one paid much attention to it, but the fire spread quickly. Within just a couple of hours, the downtown area had become an inferno. Firefighters tried to deal with the fire, but they did not have enough water, and the equipment was outdated. In the end, the flames raged for almost 24 hours, destroying 776 buildings. These were stores, offices, banks. In one night, the damage amounted to $1.7 billion. This is one of the most expensive fires in the history of the United States. As for the victims, there were about 20 people, but tens of thousands of people were out of work because their jobs just burned. In the basement of this building was a warehouse with combustible materials. It is believed that a spark from a coal-fired boiler could have ignited the combustible materials in the basement. Number 9. Amsterdam Fire. In 1452 in Amsterdam, the wooden church of St. Nicholas caught fire. It seems that nothing ordinary can be extinguished, but because of the wooden buildings, the fire began to spread with great speed. They say that burned about 75% of the city, which is hundreds of houses, shops, warehouses. People then extinguished as best they could, but the wind was fanning the flames and it was almost impossible to stop it. Fortunately, there were not so many victims, but still dozens of people died. But the losses were enormous. The city was a trading center then, and a lot of goods were burned. Fabrics, grain, wood, all in all, a disaster for the economy. Number 8. A fire in London. It started on September 2nd, 1666, in a bakery in Padding Lane. The owner, Thomas Fariner, apparently neglected to look after the oven and sparks spread to the neighboring houses. And there, the wooden buildings, crowded, dry weather. In general, the fire spread so that it was almost impossible to stop it. It burned for 4 days. It burned more than 13,000 houses, 87 churches, including the famous St. Paul's Cathedral. Surprisingly, only a few people died, officially 6, although tens of thousands were left homeless. Losses were colossal. At the current exchange rate, it is 12.4 billion American dollars. But what is most interesting and surprising, at that time there was a pandemic of plague, and the resulting fire destroyed the rats and fleas that spread the plague. The fire eventually ended the pandemic. Number 7. Chicago Fire. The Chicago Fire of 1871 started on October 8th. The fire quickly got out of control. Like everywhere else, since most of the buildings were wooden, they caught fire quickly. The city burned for 3 days. More than 17,000 buildings burned, including homes, stores, offices, and even theaters. About 100,000 people were left homeless. At the time, that was 1/3 of Chicago's population. Between 200 and 300 people died, according to various estimates, although the exact number is still unknown. The losses amounted to $7 billion, and the cause of the fire is very funny, all because of a cow that supposedly knocked over a kerosene lamp in a barn. True or not, the fire started in the barn where the cow was hanging out. The town was rebuilt with new technology, using more stone and steel. It was after this fire that the world's first skyscraper, the Home Insurance Building, was built. Number 6. San Francisco Fire. Early in the morning of 1906, a 7.8 magnitude earthquake struck San Francisco. The earthquake itself was devastating, but the real disaster came from its aftermath. Pipes carrying gas, water systems, and live wires began to burst and tear. This led to gas leaks, fires, and random water leaks. Soon the city was plunged into chaos. Pockets of flames began to appear everywhere, and firefighters trying to put out the fires faced a critical problem: lack of water. The fire raged unchecked for 3 days, turning San Francisco into an inferno. The city was virtually destroyed. More than 28,000 buildings burned, including luxury hotels, theaters, and entire residential neighborhoods. About 3,000 people died, and almost 300,000 were left homeless. That's more than half of the city's population. The losses amounted to a colossal $11 billion by modern standards. To stop the spread of fire, firefighters and the military decided to take radical measures. They began to blow up entire neighborhoods, creating fire breaks. However, due to chaos and lack of coordination, some of the explosions only worsened the situation, causing new fires. Number 5. Tokyo Fire. On September 1st, 1923, a massive magnitude 7.9 earthquake struck Tokyo and the surrounding area. But the hardest part began afterward. It was the day all the people were having lunch. Almost all the houses had gas stoves to cook food on, but because of the earthquake, the gas pipes started to burst, thereby leaking gas. The fire quickly spread through the city where most of the houses were wooden. Tokyo and neighboring Yokohama were in a very difficult situation. The fires continued for several days, destroying more than 300,000 buildings. Unfortunately, about 140,000 people died. Many suffered from the fire or were under the rubble. The damage was huge. The economy of Japan suffered heavy losses, $331 billion. After the disaster, panic and rumors arose, which led to unfortunate events. Korean immigrants began to be unfairly blamed for arson and riots. Number 4. Peshtigo Fire. The Peshtigo fire occurred on October 8, 1871, the same day as the Great Chicago Fire. But while Chicago is on everyone's radar, Peshtigo remained in the shadows, even though the situation there was much more complicated. Forest fires were raging in the Wisconsin area at the time, which turned into a huge firestorm due to strong winds. The fire whirlwind was moving with great speed, destroying everything in its path. People tried to escape in the river, but there was one problem. The water was getting very hot, so you can see what was happening to humans. Unfortunately, about 1,500 people died. The town of Peshtigo and surrounding settlements were almost completely destroyed. The damage amounted to $4 billion. Number 3. Los Angeles Fire. The Los Angeles Fire, which started on January 7, 2025, was one of the most destructive fires in the city's history. It started because of the strong Santa Ana winds, which blew at 100 kilometers per hour and literally blew the fire. These winds got their name in honor of the Santa Ana Canyon in Southern California, through which they traditionally pass. According to another version, the name comes from the Spanish expression Satanas, Satan, as the locals considered these winds devilish because of their destructive power. A drought that lasted for several months made the grass and trees dry as gunpowder, and the fire quickly spread to wealthy neighborhoods such as Pacific Palisades and the Hollywood Hills. Many people were affected. Some 16,000 buildings were destroyed, including the homes of celebrities. The damage was estimated at $95 to $164 billion, with $75 billion being insurance payouts. More than 180,000 people had to be evacuated, and sadly, 10 people died. The fire also destroyed the habitats of many wild animals. Number 2. A fire in Siberia. It happened in the summer of 2021. There was a heat wave and a drought. The exact cause of the fire is not known, whether it was a spark from a dry thunderstorm or a safety violation. But the fire began to spread at a tremendous rate. Smoke from the fires covered major cities: Yakutsk, Krasnoyarsk, Novosibirsk. Visibility in some areas dropped to several meters, and the concentration of harmful substances in the air exceeded permissible norms dozens of times. The authorities announced evacuation, but many settlements were cut off from the outside world, surrounded by a wall of fire. In Yakutia alone, 8 million hectares of forest burned, and in Krasnoyarsk Krai, another 5 million. This is more than the area of some countries. Millions of animals died, including rare species, and the economic damage was estimated at $2 billion. Smoke from the fires reached even the USA and Canada, and CO2 emissions amounted to 800 megatons, as if Germany had been running on coal for a year. Number 1. Forest fires in Australia. From 2019 to 2020, Australia's wildfire season has started. At that time, these fires were even nicknamed Black Summer because the situation was really difficult. It all started because of extreme heat, drought, and strong winds. Temperatures in some places rose to 50 degrees, and there was no rain for months. The fires spread quickly, and the states of New South Wales and Victoria were the hardest hit. The smoke from the fires was so thick that it was seen even in New Zealand, which is thousands of kilometers from Australia. More than 18 million hectares of forests burned. That's just a huge area. About 1 billion animals died. People were also affected. Thousands of houses were destroyed, and tens of thousands of people had to be evacuated.